Hello again. I'm back again here to discuss all those things and topics where angels fear to tread, and along with being a bigot, homophobe, Islamophobe, is anti-Semite, and racist. Of course, provocateur. So now that we got that out of the way again, this world of breaking the new 10 commandments, which have been issued to us by none other than Trotsky back in 1919, whenever they did this, and Karl Marx, their main sort of Bible writer as such, issuing us with our new 10 commandments with which we live by today. I'm going to go back into topics, touch on lots of topics I've already touched again, expand on them, and do again a little tour around important topics which need to be discussed as well. One of these is this completely exaggerated, the white supremacist terrorist narrative, which is it's insipid in the very least. It's malevolent, and it's basically we don't really need the Stasi police anymore, because basically citizens are now acting as the Stasi police. Also, our YouTubers, people who control YouTube, Google, Facebook's, etc., and even family to some extent when it comes down to being forbidden from discussing politics, your politics, mind you, because politics is always discussed, always. Doesn't matter what group or circumstances that you watch, give it a long enough timeline, some form of politics will be discussed. Anyway, this completely exaggerated white nationalism or whatever was kind of encapsulated and proved for me with the kind of Oklahoma bomber, which was kind of pictures were quickly flashed on the news of the bombing, and the relatives mourning over the dead. But on a close inspection, a general, under expert scrutiny, this bombing is just an absolute lie. The whole thing was the bomb happened. it definitely very much blew up. But this bomb or narrative that there was a van parked by Timothy McVeigh, who was a loyal soldier. On his death certificate, he was listed him as being in military. Still, on the day of his, execution, because he was executed for this. But when you look at that explosion, it's quite obvious that the way the building's kind of sheared in half, and the way the columns are blown outward, it kind of displays something that smacks of a complete setup. So, then so long ago, what would the motive of this kind of thing be? Well, it's obvious. It's to demonize, keep this continuation of the demonization of your straight white male Christian extremists / white nationalists / whatever. Whilst now, current day, we actually under threat by real terrorists, Islamic terrorists, Mossadic terrorists, whatever you want to call them, Talmudic terrorists. But what is scrutinized is white supremacism. This is what the cops have an absolute, itchy ass about. They got this extremely itchy arsehole about this. And they primed to just respond to these kinds of things. And there's very little attention given to Islamic extremism. where a perfect example was that Islamic extremist who was on a special program and to, bring the best out of him, and he went and murdered the very people that were, you know, facilitating his, what do you call it, is trying to facilitate him back into society, so to speak. While they will end up banging on the door of a white nationalist who made a racist tweet or something like this. And they will find these people, and resources will be immediately available for these kinds of things under the pretense of, well, these madman kind of white supremacists that go around blowing people up. And, that also that new guy in Norway adds sort of credence to their views, to their focus on this issue. But it was brought to my attention by a podcast of Dr. Peter Hammond and Andrew Carrington Hitchcock, again, of General Ben Parton, who is an incredible guy. Half of what they said is true about this guy. He's pioneered military technology like you can't believe. A lot of which came from Germans, scientists of which they had in towards the end of World War II, all the way back then. I mean, we're talking about precision-guided bombs, and in a rough form, the technology was around. Like it's totally credible. But what we end up with instead now, instead of like this guy is a hero, and there's this demonization process of whites, which is white straight males. It doesn't apply to just whites. It's got to be white straight males. There's a Christian as well. There's this absolute demonization program, and it's ongoing. It never stops. I mean, you can see it by the media. You can see it just by the advertising programs in the underground. But how this, affects us as well, and what you see in society is people are actually, they live this. You've got your cuckoo bird, mentality going on in our white females, of who absolutely think it's the most fantastic thing to go traveling to India alone, backpacking in India alone, or backpacking in Morocco alone. Two girls got their heads chopped off while they were alive with a knife. Not very pleasant to watch. The footage is out there. The pictures are out there. It happened. The two girls, who knows what they did? They probably were sleeping together or something that offended an extremist in the Islamic side, and they just went, completely animal on them, under the guise of their religion of tolerance. Or girls backpacking in India, and I've come across this where a girl kind of said, "Yeah, well, I did that for years," and then she lists off all these horrible incidents that happened to her. Indian man brushing up against her very hard in a train, or grabbing the legs, whatever. But I said to them straight up, to her, this, whatever made you think that this was the right place for you to travel? Of course, I'd just say these things, and I don't think about it anymore, because I do think about it. I mean, it comes from a place of thought, obviously. It's called common sense. But what perplexes me always is how harsh they'll be towards a white guy who was a little bit, pushy, or came on to them like the most pathetic excuse to demonize some white guy, and how they react to this versus but then they travel in India, and it's like what they'll tolerate there and what they'll tolerate from these men. And inevitably they end up actually becoming a complete cuckold bird, and you know, raising their children from within their own womb, while they demonize their own kind. You know, um, there's kind of this disconnect, and you just kind of astonished with this. It's not even. It's like you don't exist basically until, of course, you come onto them or something, and then they absolutely demonize you. You know, and I don't know what constitutes that, because most guys are too scared to even try nowadays, because they're afraid they're going to be accused of some kind of Me Too crime. You know, because at some point you have to cross the boundary. At some point you have to. It is like physically impossible to engage in a relationship without at some point doing something that they could turn around and accuse you of sexual harassment. I mean, the codes are so pathetic. But they'll travel alone in India and get absolutely be like a 10-year-old sitting there at a bus stop eating cotton candy, that kind of absolute innocence. They pretend that everything is just pure and innocent there, you know, and they think very differently, where they're primed, through the failed relationship narrative and the Hollywood demonization process. A classic one for me, it's not so much Hollywood, it's just was crap television. But I watched one or two episodes, and it's because it was all there was to watch a lot of the time was Law and Order Special Victims Unit. You know, a classic case of demonizing the heroes and victimizing the villains, where rap artist Ice whatever is what was his name? Ice Cube, not Ice Cube, Ice T, I think, is the top hero detective, and along with a Jewish-looking counterpart, and they the voice of reason, and every single criminal is a white sex pest, crime, child murderer, every single time. When we know statistically black on white female rape statistics in America versus white male on black female statistically, it's like it doesn't exist. It's unbelievable. It's astonishing. And what they also class as black often is like Hispanic, more Hispanic, Mesisto type. So it's like almost it's non-existent. And in South Africa too. I mean, where you can go to a police station and say, look, I have friends in the police reservists. So I'd ask them, what are the stats of white male and black female rape? They're like, well, what are you talking about? They've never heard of it. I mean, these guys aren't like, they're obviously politically correct, or they wouldn't even be allowed near the police force. But you've got to look at these things, and it's an honest fact of reality. What is the black male on female rape statistic versus the white male on black female rape statistic? Let's see who's actually really the demon. But Law and Order Special Victims Unit, well, we've got to demonize the white male, of course. And when you look at who the producers are, Wolf or whatever his name is, it's pretty obvious. It's not Christian straight white males in that department. Also the advertising campaign, which one sees throughout the underground, through the HSBC, what comes up, bank, what comes up on the page, their login page, straight up is a mixed race, white female, black male relationship. Why would this be a demoralization program? And so what, you might say? Well, I'll tell you so what. When a nation won a war, one of the things of humiliation was, obviously the men took the women for themselves. This is a situation where the men of another tribe are now just depicted with those women by people that we never asked to do this, who have control of our advertising and our industries of mainstream media across the board. And it's a primal kind of instinct that this is now a defeated nation now. That they're perpetuating this. Optics is very powerful. And why do you think they pay millions for an advert on a television? Millions for a 30-second slot. It's because optics are so powerful. You think that these movies with an hour and a half, 90 minutes, and they have a little side plot of a gay couple or lesbian couple, that's because it's advertising. This is indoctrination. This is propaganda of the highest order. It was never asked for. It was imposed upon us. And we don't seem to be able to impose anything in return on the perpetrators of these things, which is a huge factor, which I always discuss. Why was it important? Why is it an important optic for them? Why is it so important? I mean, what's the motive? If I'm such a crazy loon to notice this stuff, well, even in the old days, you got to be quite honest with yourself. When somebody was called a bastard in the old days, it was your family was slandered, and you were that was for a woman to bear a bastard son, and for that child, it was forever shame upon them. How would they know if someone was a bastard? Unless the child came out distinctly looking different from the parents, the father. And this can only happen with an interracial hookup. It's got to be the most obvious way without them having access to DNA. And a woman's in a relationship with a man, she gives birth to a white child. Who's going to know? Who's going to know? Or it was, born out of wedlock. That doesn't come around like on a tag around your neck that you can forever immediately point out, bastard. So society must have had a way of identifying, and I venture to suggest it may have only been via an obvious racial distinction, where this black child comes out and, that's the end of that. So it's pretty clear that who the father was not of that tribe. Anyway, another kind of touch, just